President of the Barbados International Business Association, or BIBA for short, Mr. Andrew Alleyne, Executive Director of BIBA, Mr. Henderson Holmes, members of our discussion panel, representatives of our sponsors of International Business Week 2015, specially invited guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gregory McConney. I am the first Vice President of BIBA and the Chair of the International Business Week 2015 Steering Committee. Allow me to offer you a special welcome to our annual discussion forum for International Business Week 2015. This year, the discussion will be framed around the topic, International Business, New Paths Forward. The topic for this 7th International Business Week discussion forum was chosen to encourage every Barbadian to think outside the box when it comes to international business. Traditionally, the sector comprises lawyers, accountants, and bankers, and so on. However, this industry is so dynamic that this evening we are exploring international business within the creative sector. Therefore, tonight's forum offers an opportunity for us to see international business with slightly different eyes. As usual, we have sought to have a variety of perspectives from which this topic can be approached, and therefore, we are really pleased to be able to have Lynette Eastman, Phil Phillips, and Tyson Thompson bringing their experiences to bear on this discussion. You will hear more about their respective backgrounds later. We're also fortunate to have our immediate past president and director moderating tonight's event, and so we expect Connie to round out the views you hear this evening with a perspective gleaned from her many years of experience within the industry. As I look out to the audience tonight, I'm happy to see that there are a lot of unfamiliar faces. We don't hold this event to talk amongst ourselves. The reason that this forum is free and open to the public is that we want to have a dynamic exchange of views that can only be made that much better when we have questions and comments that challenge us to all reconsider the international business sector in a whole new light. For the first time this year, we have incorporated live streaming. The idea behind this initiative is to allow this discussion to be far-reaching and include as many interested minds who may not be able to be physically present with us this evening. A warm welcome to you viewing online. I am also pleased to have a cross-section of UE students in the audience. While as Barbadians we might take secret pride in that tongue-in-cheek aphorism that you can find a Bajan anywhere in the world, the flip side of the situation is that we lose access to much knowledge and expertise as it is exported abroad to the benefit of world economies. The message that we like to send is that the Barbados international business sector provides ample opportunity for Barbadians to engage in the kind of fulfilling international careers that they would wish to pursue, but based right here in Barbados. Therefore, we continue to count on the University of the West Indies as an important strategic partner in the growth and development of our sector, as it provides the skilled resources needed to drive the growth that we seek. Barbados, with its limited natural resources, but its highly valuable human resource, is a natural fit for international business. And this week of activities has been designed to show the public that when they support the international business sector, they're supporting the employment of about 4,500 fellow Barbadians who are using their earnings to sustain families in these difficult economic times. We continue to share this message wherever we can, and we hope that by the end of this evening, you will join us in spreading that word as well. With that said, it is now my pleasure to invite our moderator, Ms. Connie Smith, the Managing Director of Tricor Caribbean Limited and our immediate past president, to introduce to you our distinguished panelists. I look forward to enjoying the evening's discussion and engaging with many of you during the refreshments later. Thank you, and enjoy the discussion.
Good evening. It is my distinct pleasure this evening to be the moderator, and we have a distinguished panel of guests to join us this evening. As I introduce them, they will join me here on the stage, and then we will enter into a good discussion with each of them, spending 10 minutes before we have a fuller discussion. Ladies first, Ms. Lynette Eastman is a founding member of the Barbados Film and Video Association, Inc., and has been its president for the past 2 years. She is an attorney at law who also worked as Director of International Business in the Government of Barbados. While there, Lynette negotiated tax, trade, and investment agreements and was also central to the establishment of the Barbados Coalition of Service Industries. Lynette Eastman was a senior international tax manager with the firm of PricewaterhouseCoopers. Next, Mr. Tyson Thompson. Tyson is licensed as a practicing chartered accountant. He provides international tax planning involving Barbados and other Caribbean islands in relation to the US, Canada, various African, Asian, European, and South American countries. He also has extensive experience in corporate budgeting and related finance and administrative services. Tyson is a graduate of the University of the West Indies and the University of Windsor, Canada. Before establishing his practice, Tyson held several senior management positions at a major oil company, including regional tax manager for 15 territories of the English, French, and Dutch Caribbean region. Tyson is a member of the International Tax Specialist Group, an international network of affiliated tax specialist firms, and holds professional designations as a Fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Barbados, as an FCA, a Fellow of the Certified General Accountants Association of Canada, CGA, and a Trust and Estate Practitioner, TEP. And last, we have Mr. Phil Phillips. Phil is the Managing Director of eVisions Concept and has been since 1995. He serves in an advisory capacity to regional and international entities in the areas of entertainment, intellectual property development, marketing, and visioning. In addition, Phil serves as a consultant with the Inter-American Development Bank on the Caribbean Cluster Initiative for Animation Outsourcing and Intellectual Property Development. His responsibility is to guide and enhance the capacity of clusters and firms to increase productivity and sustainably compete in national, regional, and global markets. From 2010 to 2013, Phil served as a marketing consultant with Toon Boom Animation and was responsible for the creation, design, and implementation of a Caribbean mission plan for the company to stimulate and promote the Caribbean as the next animation hub. Phil was also the managing director of Crossfire Ventures Limited from 1992 to 1999. He led the company's achievements for the largest number of record units sold by a regional group, Pump Me Up, the CD by Crossfire, which is 50,000 units, achieving gold status in Canada. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please join me in welcoming the panel? Great. So if we can start with a discussion by having each member of the panel give some introductory remarks, and we're going to limit that to 10 minutes. And again, we're going to go ladies first, gentlemen. So Lynette, please, feel free.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and let me start by thanking the Barbados International Business Association for inviting me to participate in this panel, which I'm sure we will all benefit from, and we will see the importance of making the linkages between the sector and other subsectors. Well, I would start by saying, firstly, that when we look at the International Business Companies Act, we would see that in Section 6. Section 6 is actually quite a very broad provision. It defines international business as including the provision of services generally, and then it also goes on to say any other business. I have always interpreted that to mean that the framers of the International Business Companies Act always recognized that the act could be used for the export of services other than financial services. And I would say too that in the development of the sector, for a long time, there was a lot of discussion, and I would say to some extent some uncertainty as to where to place the sector in Barbados. There was always a discussion about what was being done in other islands, what was being done in other countries. But I had always believed that Barbados had chosen a path where it would use all of these facilities, including this legislation, to really develop the services that we have developed expertise from, which then would be linked to the fact that we have a long tradition of providing education in a number of various areas. So the International Business Companies Act actually, from the outset, recognized that other services would be exported from Barbados and that there should be a policy to export those other services. Now, with respect to the film sector in particular, which is an emerging sector, when I examine what the framework within the international business sector, you will find that there are similarities. In order for the international business sector to grow, there are a number of fundamental underpinnings that were required, one of them being a trained and educated workforce. And with respect to the film industry, that has been happening for at least 6 years now, where we've had the establishment of the Errol Barra Center for Creative Imagination, where courses are taught here to degree level. The Ministry of Culture also has a program in filmmaking. And most recently, the Barbados Film and Video Association was able to partner with BIMAP in order to make a proposal for a grant to the CBTF fund, where we got some $800,000 to do training for professionals in the sector. So the training and education part of it, we're working on that. The policy framework as well, and the legislative framework is also critical, as you know, for international business. Some of the international business legislation is relevant. You will see, when I was director of international business, I noticed that some of the musicians set up international business companies. That would be the more successful of the musicians who would be exporting their services. So some people in the cultural sector obviously recognize the connection between the cultural services and exporting and the international business sector from way back then. So for them, it is nothing new. In addition, I would say for the film sector, however, there are some specific pieces of legislation. And as you would know, in the international business sector, from time to time, there are specific pieces of legislation that you need to put in place. So the Cultural Industries Development Bill was recently passed, and in that we have specific incentives for filmmakers. We're also partnering with the government to put in place legislation to attract investors to Barbados. There needs to be specific legislation for that because within the international community, the incentives for that kind of investor are rather specific. So if you're going to be competitive, you need to have that specific legislation that can compete with other jurisdictions. But where film is concerned in Barbados, there there's always been what I would say efforts by others, and without it ever being really a policy. Barbados, the first film that was made in Barbados, from as far as I could see, was made in 1933, when the British came here to make a film. They could have gone to any of their colonies, but they thought that Barbados was a good place. So in 1933, there was a film called The Windmill, and you could probably find it if you Google it. It was called The Windmill. It used local music, and it also used local narration. So that was very important back in 1933. And I think that some of you may recall that Barbados was also host to the filming of the film Island in the Sun in 1953, starring Harry Belafonte. So Barbados has always been attractive without us putting any effort into it at all. These people came because they thought Barbados was a good place. And subsequently to that, we've had foreign film crews coming to Barbados on and off to do films, to do commercials, etc. So it is actually an area that if we put effort into it, you could get more of that investment. The other part of the film sector, of course, is our local filmmakers who engage in filmmaking to tell our own Barbadian stories and to share those stories with the world. And what happens there is that in some instances, we would get individuals from abroad to participate in those shoots, whether it is that they're bringing in some technical expertise that we think we do not have, or maybe perhaps we like a particular cinematographer or director. With the investors coming to Barbados, I should also make the point that they use local crew. They bring some of theirs, and they also use local crew. So they're on the two sides, the two aspects of it, investors coming here and Barbadians making their own films. At the end of the day, the key thing has to do with the distribution of the films. And that is one of the important areas that I think, too, within the international business sector, quite a lot of energy is spent on trying to find markets, both for investment and for the provision of services. And that is quite similar to what needs to happen within the film environment as well. Recently, the government appointed a film commissioner. So we now have a film commissioner in Barbados where we didn't have one before, so that's a start. We also set up the Cultural Industries Development Agency. So that is an agency that will look at proposals for the making of films in Barbados and to provide funding once the agency is funding. So I think, is my 10 minutes up? Yes. So I will just stop there. Thank you very much.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm moving on from Lynette. I'm taking the position that the local sector or the local policy framework and the acts and so on we have would be in place so that it creates the artists to go overseas and earn some income, some needed foreign currency for Barbados. So I'll be focusing mainly on what happens outside of Barbados and how does the policy framework or the treaties we have help the artists going out. And when we say artists, the international world, you're looking mainly at stage performers, musicians and whoever with them, the film actors, and the television people involved in television commercials and so on. That's mainly what we're looking at. And then, as I look through how the international world see the cultural industries, and basically what they see them doing and what fees they earn and all the trappings around it. They see them earning fees from performers of artists themselves. They see performance fees attributable to the rehearsals. They see fees for rehearsals, studies, meetings, negotiations, home and abroad. They see compensation for production expenses. They see agency fees for the artists, management commissions they have to pay out, They see inducement payments to the artists when they're going overseas. They also see cancellation fees going to the artists. And then if the artist is canceling himself, they have to have the insurance cover. They see sponsorship fees. They see endorsement fees. They see royalties. They see subsidies. They see publishing copyrights, sale of merchandise, and they see pensions. Now, I say all of that to put it in the context that you either perform by yourself in your individual name, or you form a company and that company does the performance for you, or you do the performance through a company name. In that last aspect, you are an employee, so therefore things like pensions and those things come in. So normally we don't hear about pensions with artists and so on, but that's where it comes in. But in general, the way the international world sees the taxation of these people, they're always taxed where they perform. Whatever you do, whichever country you go to, you're going to be taxed where you perform. And luckily for you, once you're taxed where you perform, depending whether you use an IBC as Ms. Isma referred to, or use even a local domestic simple Barbados company, you will not be taxed again in Barbados. Because what Barbados is going to do is give you a credit for what you pay overseas. And the credit you pay overseas is going to be more than what you pay in Barbados, because you either an IBC pay tax at 2.5%, or if you have a simple Barbados company, you pay tax at 1.75%. And what you deduct, what you pay overseas is going to be more than 2.5% or 1.75%. So basically, you're not going to pay tax again in Barbados. And that's one of the issues you have to keep in consideration. One of the main issues you have to consider is that when you're going overseas, of all the fees I'm talking about, you can either put together what we call bundle it and put it into one package, and you bill somebody for that. Or you can split it up into different pieces, and you bill them for different pieces. And that is going to be fundamental depending on the country you go in, as to whether the country is going to tax you on the fee itself, or they allow you to file a tax return and pay tax on the difference. And I don't think that is kept as carefully as it is. I was called something earlier this year or last year by someone who put together production and so on, and they were concerned about the withholding tax in Barbados, it being 15%. I said, but Barbados allows you to take whatever fee you charge and subtract whatever expenses you make, and you pay the 25% on your difference. But that's 25%. I said, but yes, you prefer to pay 15% of $100,000 or 25% of $10,000. The rate doesn't matter. Is what is there at the end of it. And why I'm saying that is that of all the treaties we sign, the only ones that allow you to have a deduction, that is when you go overseas, you charge your fees and you subtract your production expenses, you subtract the fees you have to pay to the people that your margins and so on, are the Netherlands, Norway, Spain, most importantly, the UK and the US. So when you go to the UK and the US, you're going to get a better position than if you go to all the other countries, because they allow you to file a tax return and they allow you to deduct the expenses you incur in Barbados or wherever you go, and you pay on the net. Now, if you're paying on the net, it means then that you charge everything in. If you're going to pay on the gross, which means that whatever fee you earn in that country, you have to pay a tax on that fee. It means then you got to be very careful, because those fees are very high, something like 30% and so on. So you have to be, your management team around you have to understand the dynamics of that and ensure that you bill accordingly and appropriately. Now, I split the tax world into what they call the CARICOM treaty, which we have. It's a treaty among all what they would call the former British colonies, except for Bahamas, and the non-CARICOM world. CARICOM, like everybody say, you're taxed where you perform. So you have all the entertainers and so on, and the performance artists in the Caribbean. They go to different islands and so on. Then you're not going to be taxed in Barbados, because you only tax where you perform. The question is what you're taxed on. Again, are you taxed on the net you make, or are you taxed on the gross? And probably you're going to be taxed on the net in most of them. So that is a sort of a tax perspective of what you do when you go outside. Now, fundamentally, I always get into what they call the currency aspect of it. when you earn the money overseas and you earn it in foreign currency, what do you do with it? And that's the problem we have in Barbados. Barbados offshore industry, we see people coming from outside of Barbados, making an investment in Barbados to earn income outside. The acts as we have them do not see a Barbadian going outside, earning foreign currency and bringing it back. Because to set a foreign currency account up in Barbados, if you're not an IBC, you probably can set one up, but you can't only use 70% of it. You have to leave 30% in. It doesn't make much sense to me, but that's what happens now. Fortunately for us, there's something called a Treaty of Chaguaramas, which allows freedom of establishment in another country in CARICOM, and also allows freedom of movement of capital in CARICOM. So, most people that come to me, set a bank account in St. Lucia. You put all your foreign currency in it, and what you want, you bring home. They allow you 100%. Barbados does not allow you 100%. So we have to get our currency legislation in line with what we're trying to promote. If not, the cultural industry personnel, we're going to have problems with what they do with the money they earn outside of Barbados. Now, I'm going to put a word of caution. Obviously, you're earning foreign currency. Obviously, most of it is not in Barbados. It's got to be somewhere else. Hopefully, it's not in the U.S. FATCA, people receive FATCA as Barbados giving information on U.S. people. The same way Barbados is going to give information on U.S. people, U.S. is going to give the BRA information on Barbadians with accounts in the U.S. And what is worse, Europe is coming up next year with their equivalent of FATCA, and by 2017, everybody's going to be doing the same thing. So there's not going to be hiding of cash in any bank account by 2017 anywhere. So you've got to get in to understand that we have to report, and therefore the concept of going somewhere and doing something else is different. That is important. So as it is now, the best option outside of Barbados, outside of having an IBC, and there is still some problems with the IBC Act. The IBC Act provides for, again, it provides for people that provide a service. If that service originates in Barbados, you can provide it. However, if that service does not originate in Barbados, it has to be a prescribed service. And for some unknown reason, since the Act was formed, these services were never prescribed. The Income Tax Act has a list of prescribed services, and for the last 2 years, I begged them, just copy what is the Income Tax Act and put it in the IBC Act so that we can do what we want to do carefully. We are still debating it. We are still debating it because we want to go and create a whole set of services in the IBC Act. And when you amend the Income Tax Act, you don't amend the IBC Act, they out of line and all sorts of things happen. But the point I'm making basically is that you have to understand what you're going to do when you earn your money. Finish? Okay. Thank you very much. Let me finish there. I will come back to it later on.
Tyson sounded like he was just getting wound up. Sorry. We'll get back to him after Phil gives his presentation.
A very good evening to everyone. I'd like to just ask how many cultural entrepreneurs we have in the room. Could you just show me your hands? Great. Ironically, in the prep to this discussion, I mentioned that I'm not quite sure how many cultural entrepreneurs are quite ready for all of the tax incentives and everything, because I think that in this discussion tonight, we have to focus more on why is it that for the last 20 years we've been discussing the cultural industries, and yet we've made so little headway at the level of entrepreneurship. So I throw that out to you. And I'm going to, for the next couple of minutes, focus on the animation sector to give you a backdrop of what's happening in the animation sector. And then to perhaps, hopefully, before the end of the night, we will have more persons here interested in becoming entrepreneurs in the cultural sector. Most of my thought process is shaped by this quotation from Professor Sir Hilary Beckles. And he says that the politics of globalization are about asserting one's identity. If you cannot assert the authenticity of your culture, your nation state will be rendered obsolete. And we're talking a lot about the economy, we're talking a lot about what can be done. And we don't really need any more talk, we need some action. I want to acknowledge the presence of Charles Cyrus, who is the Acting Director of the National Council for Science and Technology, who paved the way for animation to be developed in this country. And I also want to acknowledge Modu Jiang from the BIDC, as well as my cluster member from Westtoons Animation, Curtis Padmore. I'm associated with the Compete Caribbean project, and the Caribbean Cluster for Animation Outsourcing and Intellectual Property Development under the Enterprise Innovation Fund Component 3 is funded by the IDB, UK Aid, and Canada in partnership with the Caribbean Development Bank. Countries participating in the cluster are Jamaica, Barbados, and St. Lucia. The specific objective of the cluster is to build capacity of the Caribbean animation sector to deliver world-class animation services, and in so doing, establish the Caribbean as a competitive supplier of animation production and post-production services. The animation industry is valued at approximately $224 billion globally, with animation-related byproducts exceeding $500 billion. Together with the gaming industry, is expected to grow at a compound annual rate of growth of 13% in the near medium term, with faster growth occurring in East Asia, which is expected to grow by 19% annually. The main market, of course, is North America, and 42% of the countries in the animation space are of North American background. Over the last few decades, there's been a tremendous move to outsource animation from the United States and North America as a whole. And the factors contributing to this are the economic liberalization, the regulatory reform, the technological innovation, and of course, the pressure to reduce costs. The reasons for outsourcing, as I said, in India, 1/4 of the cost of production, the US companies are able to reduce their costs significantly to 1/4 of what is paid in the United States. And it's still 35 cents below countries such as South Korea and the Philippines. The key countries outsourcing animation production include the USA, the UK, France, Italy, and Spain. Let's take a look at India and see what we could learn from India. India's animation sector is growing at a rapid pace. Indian animation companies and studios have been moving up the value chain to create their own intellectual property rights. Global giants such as Walt Disney, Warner Brothers, and Sony have been outsourcing animation characters and special effects to Indian firms. Though the animation industry has been clubbed under the technological sector. Entrepreneurs say it is technically about 70% art and 30% technology. And this is why entrepreneurs who are driven by the love of art are bagging notable deals across India. India has the second largest entertainment industry in the world. And I just want to point out that 20 years ago, there was no animation industry in India. Simply stated, the Asian market has increasingly utilized North American studios due to the labor costs and the availability of qualified workers. India is transitioning, however. It started out as an outsourcing destination, and now it has gone to an original content destination. And as a result, this has paved or created an opportunity for the Caribbean to participate in the animation industry as a potential outsourcing destination. And what are the reasons why North American companies such as Disney and Sony will come here? One, it's the relative proximity to North America. Two, we're English speaking in most of the Caribbean. And our understanding of the cultural nuances of North America also helps. The Caribbean is at an embryonic stage of development in the animation space. Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, Barbados, Guyana, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Anguilla are some of the countries that are involved in developing animation training or the business of animation over the last 5 years. The Caribbean's contribution to the global economy has noteworthily been has been through popular music. The music industry can be seen as a good example of how the region has enormous capital to exploit. Caribbean artists recognized worldwide, such as Rihanna, Shaggy, Sean Paul, Carol Cox, who is a Barbadian-born DJ and producer in the UK, are mainly responsible for the success of Caribbean music, as well as the perennial figures such as Bob Marley, Jimmy Cliff, Toots and the Maytals, to name a few. Jamaica continues to be the primary source of musical innovation in reggae and dancehall. It is estimated that Jamaica employs 15,000 people through the music industry and controls 20% of the $300 million in reggae sales. The local music sector earns approximately $20 million per year and is led by overseas performances of soca artists and music bands. Therefore, when we want to build the expertise, the music industry is going to be a ready platform for our animation sector to be transported to the global marketplace and to earn significant foreign exchange. That's all I'll share for the time being, but I'd love to engage you a little later on the entrepreneurial side of the cultural industries. Thank you.
Thank you for those remarks, Phil, and indeed thank you to all three of you. I have my first question that I wanted to pose, which was a bit of a thread in the discussions that Lynette and Phil shared with us already. I would appreciate that there is a mountain of research that's been conducted in the Caribbean as part of an opportunity to diversify our economies. And I would imagine that exporting creative industries would be part of that diversification and therefore part of the mountain of research that has been collected so far. Coming out of all of that, is there a real strategic plan for the creative industry that embraces all aspects And when I say a real strategic plan, not one, as Hendy says, with lots of fancy, pretty words, but one which is meaningful and has actions and real likelihood of being implemented. And if so, where can we access that information?
Right. First of all, I would say that yes, you're right. There's quite a lot of information. When we were negotiating the services agreements under the FTA and the WTO, basically you had to do a lot of research to find out what had been done before. And my research showed me that we were saying that the cultural industries was very important to the Caribbean region from back in the 1970s. The research went all the way back there. So I must say, when I discovered that, I thought to myself, there's no need to do any more research. Just start doing stuff. That's what I thought. Now, if there's going to be a strategic plan for the cultural industries, I think maybe that is where the mistake is, because I don't think what you need for the film industry, you need for fine artists or for musicians. I think if you're going to have a strategic plan for film, you need to focus on that separately. I know they're all interrelated, and that's what people will say, but I think you really need to focus in on it. Because when you're looking at the film industry, for example, and you say film, there are so many aspects to film. There are people who come here to do commercials. There are full-length feature films. There are documentaries. There are short documentaries. There are long documentaries. There's experimental film. There's animation. So there are all kinds of different aspects to the film industry. There's trying to make an effort to create local content, to tell local stories. There's the aspect of attracting investors to Barbados. So it is perhaps necessary to, instead of thinking that you can develop a strategic plan for all of these sectors all at once in one big plan, maybe perhaps it's necessary to look at the components of the cultural industries and the various subsectors and focus on those. So as far as I know, there's no comprehensive strategic plan for the cultural industries. As far as the film industry is concerned, we are working to develop a strategic plan for that between the Barbados Film and Video Association and the government.
Yes, I'm not sure if when we started the tourism sector, if we asked if there was a strategic plan for tourism or any of the other industries, manufacturing. I don't think that these industries required a strategic plan. It's very, very simple. If we, and I reach out to BIBA, and I'm gonna reach out to entities like the Barbados Chamber of Commerce. If your organization does not have a division that seeks to promote innovation, then we're not going to develop a cultural industries. If your organization is not willing or does not see the role of intellectual property as an intangible, this country is going to develop the CEDARs and all of the wonderful framework. If we do not get entrepreneurship, and if we do not get the business community, particularly the traditional business community, to see the value of IP and innovation, this discussion is not going to move too far. So I'd like to challenge BIBA. I'd like to challenge the Barbados Employees Confederation, I'd like to challenge the Chamber of Commerce to start embracing innovation as a way of business and to start embracing intellectual property development as a must in the future, because we are complaining about the contraction of the economy, we are complaining about loss of jobs, but we're not doing anything differently.
Philip, I'm all for thinking outside the box and all for thinking innovatively and finding the niche opportunities for us to exploit and to continue to differentiate ourselves. But I don't know that we are just recently entering into the cultural industries aspect. And therefore, I think it behooves us to have some sort of plan. Where are we going? How are we going to execute on that plan? Where do we need to go? What talents do we need in? So I think that we do need to wrap some sort of infrastructure around it to make sure that we're measuring it, that we can always improve on it. So I'm not necessarily advocating that we don't have a strategic plan. In fact, I think that we do need to have some sort of target. And if, as Lynette said, that you can have one for separate areas but have an overarching one where there are synergies, that's all fine and good, but I think that we still do need to have some sort of plan.
Yeah, but all I'm saying to you is that if you were going into tourism tomorrow, it would not be a macro plan.
No, but we're not
Right,
going into it
right.
now. We've gone into it.
Right, we've gone into it without developing that macro plan, as it were.
Okay.
Because the entrepreneur saw the opportunity. And if we are able to develop that opportunity, if, for instance, I'd like to see our artists and our business people sit and talk more. And through agencies like the BIDC, we have to facilitate this discussion, because I think both parties are relatively ignorant of the other. Mm-hmm. So I'm saying that that discussion has to start, and perhaps tonight is a way for it to start. What I'd like to see coming out of tonight, that we have an engagement group where traditional business and creative entrepreneurs can sit in the same room. The creative entrepreneurs, let's be honest, 9 times out of 10, they are not able to think of the services of Mr. Thompson. They're not able to understand the legislation because they're busy in a hustle. What they really need is a framework, of operational framework that allows them to be able to have the best attorney, the best accountant, the best creative person in marketing to take their product to another level. So I'm saying that if each business, if major businesses allocate a small portion of their time to facilitating the growth of the cultural industries, we're going to see a rapid development in how we are earning foreign exchange, because the infrastructure is already there within those entities. What they need to do is to better understand the nuances of the particular sector.
I was actually going to ask you, why do you think that is the reason for entrepreneurs, cultural entrepreneurs as you call them, to be more successful and to take advantage of the opportunities that are available? It seems as though that they are very focused on their trade, but perhaps not focused on running a business. And that was really the foresight of the Barbados Entrepreneurship Foundation, to put that infrastructure in place and give those entrepreneurs access to mentors, to opportunities, to development as well, and to rub shoulders with similar people, as well as to convalesce the same business houses into freeing up some of their resources and to help guide those entrepreneurs. So there are 1 or 2 firms who have committed to that process. One of the firms I know is represented here tonight and in the way of legal services. But that has been started in a small and meaningful way. But we do need more people who are committed to the cause to roll up their sleeves and do that in a very meaningful way. But the other way that we could probably do that is more formal mentorships. I mean, there are obviously people within the region who have had and enjoyed some modicum of success, but are they being the types of mentors, or are they availing themselves to the younger other people who are interested? What's been your experience, Lynette? Tyson, I'm coming to you, don't worry.
Well, I've been thinking about whether it is true, because we seem to assume that individuals involved in the cultural industry sector, that not one single of them have a business head. And I don't think that's true. There are individuals in all aspects of entrepreneurship across the board that would prefer to do simply what their core expertise is. Most lawyers would probably prefer to be lawyering rather than be looking at accounts or making sure that there's proper administration. If you're a painter, you probably prefer to paint, not to be writing up invoices and sending invoices to people and chasing up money. I think that's the case with most people. And I don't think that it is anything peculiar to individuals in the cultural industries. But I think there's always this discussion about what the people in the traditional sector should do. And I don't know that they should do anything. If what they're doing is beneficial to them, why should they do anything else? I mean, what's in it for them? And if those in the cultural sector want those in the traditional, what we call the traditional sectors, to come to the table, I think it is their responsibility to try to figure out what would cause them to come to the table. There's always a suggestion that the traditional sector should do this, they should do that corporate Barbados needs to come on board. You hear that over and over again, and I always wonder why. I mean, why should they? Why? I mean, they're there, they're making money. Out of the goodness of their heart, they'll support a football team or contribute money to something, to a children's home, or put a piece of equipment in the QEH. But you know, it's a real world. It's a real world. It's a business world. If you want someone to come and sit at a table with you, you have to put something on the table. And therefore, in terms of looking at the business aspect of the cultural industries, in many other countries where the cultural industries or entertainment or whatever does well, the artists actually don't sit and figure out whether there's a double taxation agreement between the UK and Switzerland, where they're from. They don't do it themselves. You know, they're busy dancing or whatever it is they do, or singing. Somebody else does that. Now, so if there's an opportunity then for people who know about double taxation agreements, people who know about business, it is their business. If there's something in it for them, it is their business to make what they're offering attractive to those individuals, as if something is in it for them. I mean, you're not doing it out of the goodness of your heart. Tyson is not going to provide advice out of the goodness of his heart. Unless I call him, of course. But, you know, there has to be something in it for him. So, you know, if he believes he has a service that he can provide to people in that sector, well, then I think he needs to make himself attractive. Maybe he has to use a different language. Maybe he has to hang out in different places, or maybe in order to meet these people. So, you know, that's why I think, I really don't think anybody has a duty or obligation to anybody in the cultural industries. And the cultural industries are growing. And certainly the film industry is growing. And I'd like to acknowledge Marcia Weeks, who is here, who's done a lot of work recently in the sector. That sector is growing. But let me give you a specific example. In terms of insurance for filmmakers, you can't get insurance in Barbados. Now, why is that? You can't get insurance for your set because they just don't do it. So it isn't only people in the cultural industries that you are thinking that they don't think outside the box, but the people in insurance apparently don't think outside the box either. Why would it be difficult? Why should you not be able to get insurance for your set in Barbados when it is highly unlikely that we're doing anything which is very risky? But you can't get it. I understand why you don't get it for exemptions and omissions because, you know, that is risky. But for a set, you know, like, what's the problem there? I don't know if there's anybody here from insurance. What's the problem there? Because when somebody approaches you, the response simply is, oh, we don't do that. And that is it. So that is a question that I would like a response to, because in the traditional sectors, you seem to be quite comfortable, and therefore you're not particularly interested in expanding your business. So you know what happens? We get the insurance from overseas, and the people from overseas are quite happy to take our money, when really it could be going to you. So, you know, those are issues that we're going to come up against all the time with respect to these industries as they grow.
That's a refreshing perspective there, Lynette. And out of this, Phil has already said that we should have an action plan. So I think we have a couple of items that we could start growing that action plan with. Let me just take a question over to Tyson. Tyson, you mentioned in your brief comments that oftentimes the cultural entrepreneurs or the artists leave Barbados, generate revenue, but don't actually bring it back to Barbados. And in the international business discussion, we are embracing foreign currency back into Barbados. So what you're saying is that there's a bit of a disconnect there for the cultural industries, that we don't actually get the money back into Barbados, or is that we haven't shared with them sufficient opportunities, or do they think that international business is only for people outside of Barbados and not from within Barbados?
My point was that basically the legislation that you have now, as I said, does not see, in terms of the international business, they do not see a Barbadian going outside and earning money and bringing it back. The same way they see a non-Barbadian coming to Barbados, set a company up and earn money for and send it back where they're going to send it. If you're outside and you come to Barbados, you set a company up, you form an IBC, you have an account, you could take any money out. Well, I don't know if it happens now. You could take any amount of money out of it. If you're Barbadian, you go outside and you earn foreign currency, it's difficult in Barbados to have a bank account in which you put that foreign currency. The issue with it, and I always say we're outside the box, is that why is Barbados concerned? If they want foreign currency, why do they concerned with who earn it? Whether a Barbadian earns it or a non-Barbadian earns it, it should be no difference. It's foreign currency. I'm yet to understand why at this point in time, it probably made sense back then, but why at this point in time, in terms of getting your entrepreneurs going outside and earn and so on, why do you put everything in place to facilitate that entrepreneur, to make sure they don't have the headaches to worry about all the other things they're worrying about? Now, if I can make a point about something earlier, generally speaking, you find that the artists and in its broadest sense, the ones that they're thinking and creating, they find difficulties with dealing with the administrators and the what you would call the traditional sector like us. Their job is to go there and create. What they need around them are people that they're confiding, who are creating administration around them to deal with the traditional sector. Once you get the artist himself, who's the creator, whose mind think obviously different to how we in the mainstream think, trying to deal with us, you always have a disconnect. I normally see that when I have to deal with specifically with artists. And I shouldn't say what they need to understand, but basically what should happen is that should be a team around them to deal with these other issues and so on. To answer the next point, I do not charge the cultural entrepreneurs that come to me. I do not charge them. There are two specific people I do not charge the cultural entrepreneurs. I do not charge young people that come to me. Don't do it.
Is there a difference between young
As just a
people and
matter of
cultural
policy,
entrepreneurs,
I don't do
Tyson?
it.
Tyson, was there a difference between the cultural entrepreneurs and the young people?
Because they are both in what I call in the growth stage of what they're going to do. They are cash strapped. Some of them, especially young people, they want to earn money and so on. So why do I burden them with another set of expenses? You know, I'm there to help them to go and grow. I've already done well. People pay for me to get my education. You know, I can give back at some point in time. That's just my philosophy.
And Tyson, I hope you realize that in probably another 20 years, you mentioned just now the we in the mainstream, which I'm thinking that you meant as the traditional business. So perhaps in another 20 years, that will be completely flipped. And the so-called traditional business is going to be not so. You mentioned, Lynette, just now, you mentioned and acknowledged the presence of Marcia Weeks in the audience. I don't know whether we can get Marcia a mic, but I wanted to find out from her because she's obviously just recently experienced some success with her film in Cannes, and she has put herself head and shoulders above other people who are trying to have similar successes. Marcia, what are some of the things that you consider that important to share with young cultural entrepreneurs? What do they need? How do you access the people around you? How do you get those people to give you of their time, and how are you able to help them out?
Good night, everybody. I think that for me, the first thing is to believe in what it is I'm doing. I first of all believe I have, whether I'm writing a script, it's a great script. You know, my movie is always the best movie, and you better believe it. And when you believe in something, I find that people, well, for me, they're willing to come on board and they're willing to help. And the other thing is being open to receive help and to receive, just to be open to other connections, other people, you know, from the traditional sector who might ask you the tough questions that we as you know, cultural people, sometimes we don't want to answer, but to be able to listen to those, you know, answer those tough questions that they may ask. So for me, it's been believing in my product, believing what I have, and be very open to suggestions and people mentoring, etc.
Thank you for that, Marcia. Perhaps now I would ask if there are any questions from the audience for any of the members of the panel that we could engage them as well. I see your hand over here at the back. And maybe by way of introduction, you would state your name before you actually pose your question.
Yes, actually it's a statement. I'm Andrea King. I am the interim director of the Cultural Industries Development Authority. That agency came into existence on February 1st with a proclamation of the Cultural Industries Development Act. That agency is responsible for, among other things, promoting Barbados' cultural goods and services in terms of the export, because as we know, the foreign exchange is very critical, as well as training and development, market research and intelligence, looking for new businesses within the creative sector, among other things. The Act is online. You can find it on the GIS website or the Barbados Artists without the E.BB website. To respond, Ms. Smith, to your query about strategic plan, is anybody here from Caribbean Export? I wouldn't want to steal their thunder. So not recognizing anybody, I want to say that Caribbean Export has just completed a strategic plan for the creative industries. The specific areas they were looking at are fashion, music, film, jewelry, painting, and arts and craft. Arts and craft being the broad gamut of the visual and plastic arts. And part of that strategic plan included exporting the cultural products and services. So to answer that question, a big yes. It hasn't been made public yet, although I know that the BIDC does have a copy. One of the things that the Cultural Industries Development Authority is doing is having stakeholder meetings with entities. We've already met with the BIDC, the BCSI, Caribbean Export, the BTMI, that's the new tourism entity, and one other agency whose name escapes me now. We will be reaching out, of course, to our major stakeholder, which is the cultural practitioner. And I was remarking here to my colleague Jefferson Innes from IGM, who is a cultural entrepreneur. Let me also recognize David Jordan as one of the early cultural entrepreneurs. I myself am a cultural entrepreneur. I'm into fashion. What was I saying? Right, the major stakeholder of the, we're reaching out to the major stakeholder, which is the practitioner, to help them to understand how the legislation can help them, not just with the tax incentives, which are specifically for Barbadians and to develop the Barbadian sector, but also to understand how, when they're exporting their product, what it means for the country. I also want to say that, following on from something that Lynette said, about the Film Commission legislation. It is very specific legislation. It is, I believe, at the Office of the Chief Parliamentary Counsel, and that legislation will assist in attracting investment in Barbados from foreign filmmakers. So we're making small steps. Barbados as a nation is going to be 50 years next year. It took 50 years to do that. So, you know, we're making steps.
Thank you for that intervention, Andrea. What's that, Lynette?
I just wanted to make a comment, though, with respect to entrepreneurs. I would say specifically in the film industry. And as I said, film is quite broad. But we shouldn't go away with the idea that there are actually individuals who work in the sector and they work full-time. Because sometimes when we talk about the creative industries and a lack of entrepreneurship, et cetera, and people not knowing business, I think we need to acknowledge that there are individuals within these sectors, and certainly amongst our membership within the BFVA, that is all they do. They don't do anything else. So, and you know, they're married, they have children, they send them to school, they have a home. So they're doing basically what anybody else does, like a lawyer or somebody working in a bank or something like that. So they have actually found a way as entrepreneurs in this sector, which is an emerging one. They've found a way actually to make a living out of it, and it must mean that they must have some business acumen in order to live full-time out of that sector. And it is through doing local work, and it is also doing work from individuals who come to Barbados to produce commercials or feature films.
Yeah, I just want to drill down a little bit more, because I think that very often we will extract things that are not as relevant. I've been in the creative space for quite a few years. When you are in the creative space, I managed a band for almost 10 years. The environment that we operate within, and with all respect to the development plans and the strategic plans, the environment that we operate within is not an environment where just if you look at the economies of scale allows for the level of growth that you would need normally. You do not also have support systems. When we compare what's our experience in the Caribbean in entrepreneurship with other regions, we are not being fair, because in North America, in Europe, etc., that is part of how they exist. We as a region, it would be wonderful to be complacent and say, we're 50 years young. But the reality in relation to what we are experiencing in terms of our economy requires us to have a different perspective in terms of our psyche. And if you are not understanding that when you are in the cultural space, there are very peculiar matters that will impact on how your day-to-day operations will perform. And as I said, I just wanted to give a very personal review of the challenges, and we can speak about those at length. But this is an opportunity for you to question, so I'm not going to continue too much longer.
I think Tyson wants to pick up on that, but can I just add before Tyson does that, I think that, Phil, there are peculiarities regardless of what sphere we operate within. And I don't necessarily subscribe to the thinking that we should cocoon peculiarities or cocoon people because they may be having challenges. You may not appreciate the challenges on the other side because you may not operate in that space, but regardless of where we're at or what area we choose to operate within, we have to appreciate that there will be peculiarities.
I just think I have to clarify that. I'm
Please.
saying to you that if you are in the private sector, you are in insurance, you're in banking, there are peculiarities no matter what industry there is. The challenges in the cultural industries is that you do not have a formal sector. You do not have other people that you can really always look to. So it isn't only that you are confronting peculiarities, that is common. And I wasn't suggesting that it wasn't. All I'm suggesting is that you do not have the environment and the framework that other sectors that are more formal would have.
Thank you for that clarification. Tyson, maybe when you're answering or adding to that, you would also bring us back to how we can create new paths forward for the cultural entrepreneurs to embrace international business.
I want to comment on two things. One, from my aspect of taxation. Now, what I said tonight sometimes become totally irrelevant because you only talk about tax when you make money. If no money is made, you don't need me. Okay? That's fundamental. The other fundamental thing that I keep hearing is that we create acts, and those acts make things happen. It doesn't happen. The entrepreneur does something, and the act creates the enabling environment for that entrepreneur. So if you don't have entrepreneurs, acts don't mean anything. The other problem, I've read the new cultural industries bill, and there is a fund in the cultural industries bill, but that fund is managed, I can't remember which government department. But if you go to the tourism sector, there is a tourism development fund that is managed by somebody in the private sector. So accessing funds under the tourism development fund and accessing funds on the cultural industries bill is going to be a difference in time. And the reason it's going to be a difference in time is because if you have it in government, the government have to ensure the funds are being spent. And it goes from department to department to department. So it is what you call the process bureaucracy of having a fund being managed by a government department is going to be different to a fund being managed by the private sector. And I would think that as soon as we can get that fund being managed by somebody in the private sector, the artists, the entrepreneurs in the cultural industries may be able to access funding for themselves quicker than they're going to have to in the cultural industries. Those are fundamental things we have to understand. We create acts. Act does not create business. It creates the enabling environment of which business operates. So that's all you need to say about that. The question you asked,
I asked you how we can link back the creation of new paths forward to international business for the cultural artists. But before you answer that, I think that we appreciate that that's the purpose of the act, but I think often what happens is that acts are created at a point in time and perhaps don't necessarily have sufficient flexibility for when things change? Are we able to refresh those acts to take account or to create a better enabling environment through amendments to those acts in a timely fashion?
You can if you want to. I mean, I'm not against acts. No? All I'm saying is that they have a role to play. But the emphasis on that role, you have what you call the carrot in front of the horse, basically, in terms of how, because I keep hearing that we have an act, and this act is going to do this thing and so on. The act doesn't do anything. The people do the things. Let me finish, Lynette. I know. Because you created them, Lynette. You created them, Lynette. The reason you're not going to understand what I'm saying is because you have created them. The point I'm making is that acts does not create business. People create business. I mean, it is an obviously. I don't understand. We've got to debate that. Now, in terms of how we can help the enabling, how we can help people going forward, you have to look at the industry in terms of where we are. You are the infancy. If you are the infancy, most of what you're going to need is funding in order to get to the point where you can get to meet eventually and pay tax. If you are further up the line, depending on where you are, what part of the industry you are in, you probably don't need the funding. You need to get into other things and so on. But I find that where we are now, based on what I'm hearing tonight, is that we are at the infancy stage, and what we have to be concentrating on is how quickly we can get the funding to the cultural entrepreneur for them to go out and develop their skills and promote their skills and earn the foreign exchange that we're supposed to earn. All the rest of it is going to be just surround that and so on. That's my thinking on it.
Andrew, I don't know whether I thanked you earlier for your intervention. Thank you very much. Sorry. Are there any more questions or any comments from the audience that we can take at this time? The gentleman here in the middle has his hand up. Wait, over here. Sorry, we'll come back to you. Wait, we got this one first and then we'll go over to you over here, sir.
Good evening to you all, and thanks for having me here.
You want to introduce yourself, please?
My name is Mr. Colin from CNC Enterprises. I came here and opened a business with you guys from New York City about 8 years ago for transportation on water. As Mr. Tyson just stated, it was quite interesting. What Lynette stated was quite interesting also. But Mr. Phillips pointed out very clearly, and what I thought and what I see here was very misleading in many ways. The people never wanted to help each other at that time, and still today it's sad to see it's not helping at all. If I didn't see you three guys today talking these positive things, I would still believe that Barbados does not want to help each other. You're making understandable things that makes common sense today, which yesterday I thought it made better sense, but only today it's now coming forward to make the common sense where you need serious funding to make your tomorrow happen. And I brought it to attention by asking investors here before I went to any place as a Barbadian to see what you could do. And I didn't see it at all. So I asked international investors to assist me because Barbados still wasn't ready to make the jump forward. But listening to you guys, I feel happy seeing you guys speaking. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, over here.
Hi, good evening. My name is Curtis Padmore of West Tunes, Inc. I just wanted to highlight that I agree with Tyson. The money is so important. And I wanted to plug a specific section in the Act. I think it's Section 31, which speaks to, I believe it's any individual or company that invests in a cultural practitioner or project will receive 100% tax credit on the amount invested. So in tax terms, you're really going to be claiming the taxable portion of that. If it's a corporation, it's likely to be 25%. But it does offer some leverage to craft investment deals. And if it's one thing to say about the Act, it does create a little bit more leverage. So until the Cultural Industries Development Fund gets money, I think you should look at Section 31 with a little more attention. That's it.
Thank you for that. Any more questions from the audience? Oh, Khalil?
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Khalil Bryan of Caribbean Transit Solutions. I'm a tech entrepreneur, so I won't be approaching you as a cultural entrepreneur, but I'll definitely be coming for that advice. One of the things that I recently noticed at a conference, we went to a space, a shared, what's being called now part of the shared economy, where everybody goes into a similar space. There's access to both advice as well as resources, so tech resources or intellectual resources. We put everybody in the same space. Guys had, in one place you had lawyers, you had people that were focused on tax, etc. And what I found then, it also had the funding aspect to it. I think to advance us, a big part will be putting everybody in a similar collaborative space. And in having those conversations, I said, Barbados is one of the best places to invest as an international business. It was a Latin America, Caribbean-focused conference. And most people, the question wasn't even, oh, how good is it? It was, where is it? How are we promoting ourselves as a jurisdiction? And I know many of the lawyers and people in the legal field do a fantastic job of promotion, whether it's in the UK or whether it's in Canada. But in the cultural industries, how are you then promoting yourselves, as was mentioned earlier, and how are we getting the word out that we can be an outsourced jurisdiction as well? Thank you.
Who wants to take that question? Great idea, though, the shared economy. I think often what we hear is that in Barbados there are pockets of information that you can get in various areas, but you don't actually know where to go for it or where to access it. You sort of have to hunt around and do so much research that often you don't know quite where. If we could pool it or if we could share that in one space, as you've suggested, I think that would certainly dilute a lot of the frustration and time spent and wasted that entrepreneurs and others have in simply doing business in Barbados.
Well, firstly, I would just like to say quickly where the legislation is concerned. When I got involved in film in 2008, the filmmakers were asking for the legislation. And they said that like 10 years had passed and nothing had happened. So the entrepreneurs were the ones asking for the legislation. It isn't like the government just ran off and put it in place. They were the ones asking for it, and they were out there doing their entrepreneurship stuff. That's why they wanted the legislation. One of the issues that I would like to raise has to do with organization. And there are a number of organizations in the traditional sector that we seem to take for granted because they've been there forever. The legal profession has an association. And when I came into the legal profession, it was made easier because there was an association. There was a place where you could go to get fundamentally just about anything to find out anything you needed to know at the Bar Association office. There's ICAB, and ICAB has a strong association for its membership. There's BIBA. The medical practitioners have an association. The engineers have one. The architects have one. The filmmakers have one. What often happens in the cultural sector, I think, is that there are not these collection of individuals working together and creating an environment where they can do things like what the engineers and the doctors do for their own people. And I think that is lacking in the cultural industries. You need to have an organization. You need to have organizations. The one thing that I came out of WTO negotiations with in my own mind was that I recognized that internationally, that is how the private sector planned to protect its own markets, by creating organizations. So when they went out there and they said, oh, we can remove all barriers to trade, It was because they intended to retain barriers internally through their private sector organizations. It was as simple as that. And still we haven't learned the importance of organizations. We think it is not important to work together, but I think it is even more important for individuals who live in a small country like Barbados to come together. So we've been, for example, playing music from the time people landed on Barbados, but still there doesn't seem to be an association of musicians. So how can you come together to lobby for anything? I can tell you for sure that if the Barbados Film and Video Association did not exist, there's no way that filmmakers could have got that grant of $800,000 from the CBTF fund. It was because we were able to say, yes, we're made up of small business people, but we have an association. And I think that that is one of the key elements, and I'm sure Phil can respond to this. This is one of the key elements missing in the cultural services sector, and many people won't say it because it appears to be a criticism of the cultural entrepreneurs. But if you're not prepared to come together and work together, you know, why should a musician fresh out of community college or wherever have to figure out everything from scratch or go to ask someone a personal favor? Every lawyer that comes out of law school goes to the Bar Association and has a right to ask a question about how things are done. And I think everybody else in the world understands it, that you need to form associations, whether they call them unions or whatever they call them. But most people in the world recognize it. And we here in Barbados, in the cultural services industry, still don't recognize its importance.
I want to commend the remarks that you made in terms of associations. They are very, very relevant. But folks, I am going to keep building or flogging this dead horse, as it were. The reason why we don't have active associations is because there is no stakeholder interest on a day-to-day basis. You're not going to get entrepreneurs in the cultural sector coming together when they do not understand the strength of an association in the first place. Two, there are not many of our entrepreneurs are able to make a living in the cultural space. We sit here today, for instance, if you look at the fact that 15 years ago, our soca artists were heavily booked across the diaspora. None of the soca artists will come today and tell you that their earnings may have fallen by as much as 50%, because it's a pride thing. And therefore, they are also, even when that money was being made, that money was being made because the NCF had a plan for crop over that the artists rode on. It wasn't as though that the artist decided, I am going after this specific market. When you look at the diaspora market, whether it's film, whether it is music, whether it is dance, and I think you could confirm this, filmmaker, at the end of the day, the economies of scale do not allow you to achieve the level of growth that you're seeking. So all I'm suggesting tonight over and over is that this is an opportunity for Barbados to differentiate itself in relation to how we are going to build a cultural industries. We're not going to build it, as my friend said, on legislation. It's going to be built based on entrepreneurship. That entrepreneurship is not going to have a revolutionary effect if it's only cultural practitioners. I am suggesting we have retirees that just came off as CEOs and accountants and marketing managers. We have to find a way to link these people who have these skills with the phenomenal talent that we have here across the spectrum of the cultural industries. Now, how do we cut that up and make it work? I am not sure. But I'm suggesting to you, if we do not change our psyche, we're going to sit here and we're going to have platitudes in relation to the macro position on how we attack the cultural industries. The entrepreneurship business is a micro one. It is not going to be, as it said, legislated. It has to do with the psyche, it has to do with getting the support, and we also have to move away, because every time I hear the cultural industries, I'm hearing about funding, I'm not hearing about capital. And we have to find creative ways to raise capital. Because funding is not where it used to be. So I want to see us develop the psyche and the culture where we are saying, when we are starting an entrepreneurial business in the creative industries, let's get 20 people to invest $10,000 each. When we start to have that type of conversation, then we are ready for Tennyson. We are not quite ready as yet. And if I do not share this, I'm being dishonest to the sector.
I think that Lynette wants to respond, and then we have time for one more question.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the point, because when the international business sector was being built, yes, there were a number of entrepreneurs out there, especially in the accounting firms and also among some lawyers. They recognized this as an area that could possibly be lucrative and that would do well for Barbados. The way that it went was that they went out there, they saw the possibility of opportunities, they saw what other countries were doing. They came back to Barbados and said, this is something that we want to do. They spoke to the government about it. It was necessary, it was absolutely necessary for the government to put legislation in place. And the government was largely advised by the private sector as to what type of legislation was needed. And that relationship continued, because the entrepreneurial accountants and lawyers, although they're not seen to be entrepreneurial, who went out into Canada and the US and Latin America and wherever else, those were the ones who figured out which products were suitable to Barbados for sale. And they came back and they spoke with the government. The legislation was then created and put in place. What was there was enhanced. In terms of the marketing, seeing that this was recognized as an imperative both by the private sector and by the government, the two parties came together and said, how would we do this? For a very long time, the government did not have any promotional material whatsoever. In fact, I remember being in government and you actually used the promotional material from the accounting firms if somebody came to talk to you, because the government didn't produce any. What the government did was to provide, especially, and the central bank was very critical in this as well, they provided the framework for the marketing. So what happened is, if you were going to Canadian Rims or some other activity, you had a Barbados booth, because the individuals who got involved in the international business sector as entrepreneurs, they could not afford a booth space at a conference like RIMS. Even some of the bigger accounting firms would have found that to be a large sum of money. And you go, when you first started to go, you weren't making any money. It was just an expenditure, and you spent a lot of money on making the brochures and all that. And that was the collaboration between government and the private sector through one, legislation, through coming together and marketing. And then also you had the creation of BIBA, the Barbados International Business Association, where those in the sector were able to come together. And when a recommendation was going to be made to government, they were able to come together, thrash it out, discuss it, and then go to government and say, well, this is what we think. So I have seen, and the international business sector was created virtually, almost virtually out of nothing. It was something that Barbados decided that it would do. And that is why I am of the view that if Barbados decided that it wanted to do cultural industries, it could do that too. And it isn't like we're doing this from scratch and we never did it before. We did it in the international business sector already. We've done it. There's a template. I'm not saying that you don't need to tweak the template, but fundamentally we know how to do it. So this isn't anything that's strange for us. The only issue that has occurred over time is because the international business sector was focused on financial services, it did not quite recognize that other services sectors were equally relevant. And now that the international business sector has recognized this, I don't think there should be any difficulty. I spoke about insurance for SETs, but there's also finance and investment and those arrangements that need to be put in place. If somebody is going to be making a film in Barbados and you need investment, whether it is local investment or foreign investment, the people in the international business sector who already know about finance and investment, they could provide advice in those areas, also in taxation. So this business, the cultural industries and film, etc., it's just that you're doing something different, but all of the infrastructure, well, not all of it, but quite a lot of it is there already. And in terms of how to do it, we know how to do it already. That's my view.
Yes. Thank you for that, Lynette. I'll let you each have 1 minute to wrap up, but we have time for one more question, and Khalid already has the microphone.
Hi, good evening, everyone again. So I just want to share, I'm currently a participant in an incubator/accelerator program, currently based here in the Old Spirit Bond. And this actually is an open call for entrepreneurs who are interested in being in a collaborative space. But it's also a call to people like angels that are interested in investing as well as giving advice and mentoring. I was very lucky so my company is Caribbean Transit Solutions. We've launched a product that's very similar to Uber or Easy Taxi. It's called Beep Cab. We also have one called Beep Bus for buses, as well as something that we power a platform called DrivePal, which has been launched by Sagicor. So all these products, we're working in a space with other entrepreneurs where one guy, he's a film producer, and he produced a short for us that allowed us to submit some video to the IDB, which allowed us to win an award and go to DC, which is why I was in DC recently. So these things are happening, but the reason that I found out about the Old Spirit Bond is because I literally walked in there one day. There was no information online. There was no information through anybody I'd heard about it. It just came anecdotally through another conversation. So it's happening, and it was originally envisaged as a space for creatives. So as we move and transition, we're tech entrepreneurs, but there's an opportunity there for creatives, and I just wanted to share that. So thank you.
Thank you for that.
Very much question. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Sorry, we only had time, before we get kicked out of the auditorium, we only had time for the one last question.
Yes, okay.
If you, perhaps, we're having a reception right afterwards, so why don't you engage with us in the reception and sort of have that discussion, if you will.
What's very important.
Sorry, I
What's
can't.
very important is this. I would like to make the point that
We can't actually hear you.
we talk a lot about film, but there's another area that I didn't hear mentioned here at all tonight. That's the whole area of gaming. And when you look at movies versus gaming, gaming area is a lot more revenue, many times more. But yet, I would like to know what's really happening in the area of gaming. Now, that is a different kind of ball game because the fundamentals of gaming is programming, right? And what the bright Barbadians are doing. A lot of us still doing the traditional areas, accounting, engineering, and medicine. But gaming is a real area that you be creative in, and Barbados will need a small percent of that gaming market, and you will do very, very well.
Thank you for that comment. Maybe somebody can pick up, in a minute that we have allocated for each person, pick up something to respond to you. I have no resources to add to your gaming question. I know it exists, and I know that the opportunities are huge, but beyond that, I can't add anything as to where we're progressing or what we're doing in that area, but perhaps one of my colleagues can. Phil, you want to start the closing?
Yeah, I can't answer the question specifically, but I know that Curtis will probably have a little bit more to add on gaming. As you may have missed my presentation, I spoke of gaming in my presentation on animation, which is where I specialize. I just want to thank Biba for this session tonight. I want to reiterate that, for instance, the music sector has done so many trade events. We have done MEDEM, we have done WOMEX, we have done South by Southwest. But you know what happens? We return to Barbados, we don't have the infrastructure around us, we don't even do the necessary research, because the persons who are attending these events are cultural people, they're creative people. And the essence of my presentation tonight is that there's an opportunity for us who have the additional skills to engage cultural entrepreneurs. I don't like the word practitioners. Cultural entrepreneurs, to see what opportunities lie beyond what they're actually experiencing. And if we can have that level of engagement, we're going to find that we're going to build a more robust sector. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Phil. Tyson, do you have anything to add to your comments in the last minute?
No, I just want to make just one quick response or answer his question on marketing. I'll do it in a minute. Basically, what happens in Barbados is that I was with the minister, and he was saying that the offshore industry contributed $750 million to the economy, and tourism contributed $1.2 billion to the economy. But if you look at the offshore industry budget, and you look at the budget for the tourism industry, you realize why the marketing is not there. So the issue, to me, to the culture industries is that they have to start doing what Lynette talked about, coming together and lobby the right people. They get that allocation a bit more skewed than it is now, sorry, less skewed than it is now, so that more money gets available to promoting the culture industry. You need to visit Invest Barbados.
Lynette, maybe by the end of tonight we'll get Tyson to say international business rather than offshore.
Sorry. I apologize.
That's fine, just teasing you.
I want to thank Biba for having this session. And what I want to say on behalf of the Barbados Film and Video Association is that we have reached out to you before, and we will reach out to you again in order to see how we might be able to collaborate in the future and bring some of the recommendations that have been made here to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynette. And if I can quickly wrap up some of those recommendations, we talked about the strategic plan, and Andrea told us that, in fact, Caribbean Export has recently completed the strategic plan, so we need to be able to disseminate that information as widely as possible and get going with that initiative. We also talked about the formation of a cultural industries association. It sounds to me like Phil needs to work very hard at convincing his colleagues about the viability and the use and the access to information to make that association a reality, and pretty soon. So that should be one of the actions that we should see coming out of this discussion. And one other thing that you mentioned was the opportunity to get funds managed by someone in the private sector rather than the public sector that currently obtains. So those are some of the comments that I made while you were talking for the action plan going forward. So I hope that someone will actually take us up on this, so next year when we come back and have a dialogue, that we are actually making progress and not waiting for someone else to take up the baton to make those realities happen. Audience, thank you very much for your participation. As we mentioned earlier, there's going to be a reception following this discussion. So if you have other questions and we weren't able to entertain those questions, feel free to dialogue and engage with us at that time. And if I can now invite the Executive Director, Henderson Holmes, to deal with the presentation of the gifts that we have for our panel, as well as deliver a vote of thanks.
Good evening, everyone. I enjoyed this evening's discussion. I don't know about you. Did you enjoy the discussion? A round of applause to the moderator and the three very knowledgeable panelists. I understand there's supposed to be a gift giving, so before I do any Thanksgiving, I'm going to invite Laurie Blackman up to take care of the gift giving. Okay. Well, I heard the moderator talk about the fact that we run the risk of being kicked out of the auditorium. And I would like us to get kicked out and not get the refreshments that await us just outside. So I'm going to be very brief. As Executive Director of BIBA and a member of the 2015 International Business Steering Committee, the planned the whole International Business Week, I want to thank you for joining us this evening as we continue to celebrate the contribution of the international business sector in Barbados and recognize its transformational potential evidence here tonight. I thank the panelists, International Tax Consultant Tyson Thompson, the president, Ms. Lynette Eastman, who's the president of the Film and Video Association, Mr. Phil Phillips, director of eVisions Concepts, for sharing their invaluable knowledge, experience, and insight on the creative sector here with us this evening. Thank Lynette for her history lesson in filming in Barbados. I didn't realize that we were doing filming in Barbados in 1933. My knowledge goes back to Tamarind Seed and Island in the Sun. 1933 is before my time, you know. I mean, before my time, you know, before everybody else's time, you know. I would also like to thank our moderator, of course, Ms. Connie Smith, for not only keeping the proceedings flowing, but also offering her own particular perspective on some of the points raised by the presenters. And the audience members here, I'd like to thank you for your participation. I should also thank the chairperson of the Education Committee. That is the planning committee that planned this particular event and all the other education events, the school symposium which we had this morning, etc. And that's Ms. Carolyn Atong. And of course, she had a team that worked with her, so we want to thank them as well. And we want to thank them especially for the foresight to choose a topic that engage our minds on a new dimension of international business, one well suited to our international business diversification agenda, because that has to be foremost in our minds now. Before I close, it would be remiss of me not to acknowledge the premium sponsors who have contributed to making this week's activities a success. So we have our diamond sponsor, Invest Barbados. Our gold sponsor is the Central Bank of Barbados and ex-Caribbean Attorneys at Law. Silver sponsors, Heridial Soda and Associates, Sidel Bank and Trust, Ernst & Young, KPMG, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Clark Giddens Farmer, and Tricor Caribbean. To our strategic partners, the Central Bank of Barbados, Corporate Affairs and Intellectual Property Office, the Financial Services Commission, Invest Barbados, the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Industry and Commerce, and the University of the West Indies, thanks to you for your collaboration with this International Business Week and International Business Week from its inception. And finally, I thank you all again for coming out this evening, and even those who are joining us virtually, coming out and embracing the knowledge that we have available to share with you about our sector. Before I go, I would encourage any student in the audience to join us tomorrow evening, tomorrow afternoon, from 1 to 6 p.m. on the Gill lawn of the campus for our annual Career Showcase. In addition, I'd also like to encourage all of you to attend the Biba Charity Walk. This is in aid of the health services in Barbados. We've been doing this for some years now. So it is time well spent, and the t-shirt doesn't cost too much. So that is Saturday at 4 p.m. You can join us. It starts at Copacabana and it ends at Copacabana. And everyone is guaranteed a good time at the end of the walk. So good night to all of you. Thank you again for coming.